Greetings and salutations. Welcome to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Before we begin, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share this channel with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. My guest today is an actress, producer, and playwright. She co-wrote Louis and Keely Live at the Sahara with Jake Broder for Sacred Fools Theater. In 2012, she wrote Stoneface for Sacred Fools, winning the 2013 LA Weekly Award for Best Production. And in 2019, her original musical about serial killer H.H. Holmes, entitled Deadly, with composer Ryan Johnson, premiered at Sacred Fools and later moved to Webster Conservatory for further development, but premiered with a new revision online in December 2020 due to COVID restrictions on live performances. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Vanessa Stewart.
Hi.
I hope I got that all correct.
Yeah. Yes, you did. It's Louis and Keely, but people often get that wrong. It's right. Even when they announced our award, they said the best musical of the year goes to Louis and Keely Live at the Sahara. And I was like, well, this close.
So you've done 2 musicals.
Well, I've done 3.
Okay.
One is going to be, 2 are going to be published. One was a one-man show that my friend Amir inspired me to do because I hate one-man shows. And so I just kind of decided to write a one-man show that I would actually enjoy watching. So.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack that. Why do you hate one-man shows? I have a theory about one-man shows, and God bless whatever listener it was. And I'm not sorry, whatever. He was a very, very charming and nice gentleman who wrote that I need to go see more one-person performances. So I have my own aversion to them. Why do you not like them?
I have seen so many that are really not about story. They're more self-indulgent. They're more about, I'm going to trap you in a theater for 2 hours and tell you about details of my life that I just, I think they're done for the wrong reasons quite often. And so I wanted to develop one that was mostly based on story, that had nothing to do with the performer, that was compelling and had a beginning, middle, end. A lot of one-man shows I see kind of meander because they're just, they're often vanity pieces.
Agree on that part. What do you, in your mind, what is the wrong reason that people are doing them?
Yes.
And I want to play devil's advocate about that in a moment. I want to hear.
I think all writers have to be clear in their motivation about why they're pursuing a piece in the first place, right? And I think a lot of one-man shows are not written by people. They're written mostly by performers, the ones that I've seen, that are looking for an opportunity to be seen, to show off their talent. And I think that motivation is not a great motivation to pursue that route of writing a one-man show. I think when we as writers really concentrate on overall theme, and the theme is something that we're trying to convey a deep inner truth, or and it's not, the theme isn't people don't understand me and I've got to really explain like where I'm coming from. I think that's when it veers off into self-indulgence, and it's not something that I care to see.
The thing that I mentioned in that got the comment in the thread was that I haven't seen enough one-man shows, because everything that I've seen is usually a piece where they're retelling some tragic moment in their life.
Yeah. And
so in that regard, and that's why I say I'll play devil's advocate in that, because they're written for the wrong reason. I think the reasoning behind that is usually cathartic.
Yeah.
So I can get behind that.
There are outliers. There are things where people will have a show that they write that is about an explicit moment that is not something that I as a person will ever, be a part of, or imagine. So some of them are really interesting. I think a lot of those ones can go on too long. Like, I want to know about the moment. I want to know about how it changed you. I want to know about how, like, why is this an important story to convey to the rest of us, right?
Sure. Do you think this can be achieved and better told, that's not the right phrase I want to use, if you were to do it as a full play, not a one-person play, but with actual characters opposed to just a retelling or playing every character?
Well, that's interesting. I just saw, to that point, I just saw a really interesting bioplay, autobiographical play called The White Chip here in Atlanta at Theatrical Outfit. And it was about his journey to sobriety.
Okay.
But he told it using two other actors. And it was irreverent and it was self-deprecating and it wasn't about how awesome he was. It was about a real journey,
Sure.
and he was very honest about his journey. So, I didn't, take umbrage to that. I actually rather enjoyed that.
So do you think that it was more compelling and achieved it better than if he had done it as a one-person show?
I think so. I think what we need, and a lot of writers start by kind of talking about themselves. A lot of writers start by like writing what you know, and so a lot of people are like, well, I'm going to write about when I was 15 years old and I got broken up with or whatever. I think that writers are helped when they have outside people guiding. You have an outside eye director, outside other actors, kind of adding their own perspective to it. And so it kind of creates a larger bucket of understanding, I guess.
What compels you to write in that regard as far as plays go?
Well, so you probably saw in my bio, I began as an actor,
As we all did.
Yeah, a lot of playwrights did. I think that a lot of actors that turn into playwrights are just natural storytellers. Now that I look back on kind of my life as an artist, I wrote a lot as a kid. I was just constantly filling journals and creating stories, and I just couldn't stop, writing. But I never went, I'm going to be a writer. I had it in my head that I was going to be an actor. And as I got older, I did take playwriting in college along with my, musical theater classes. And I loved it. I loved, coming to class with a piece of work, some pages I had written, all the other actors gathering around the table, interpreting those words. And I began to realize in my younger journey as an actor that I had, as an artist, as a storyteller, more power as a writer, because, when you're an actor, you kind of have, like, people have to give you permission, right? Someone has to give you a job in order to do your art, your work. But as a writer, you can tell a story anytime you want. And so I think I was getting out a lot of my frustration on the page of not having that creative outlet if I wasn't booking work, and then ultimately created a role for myself, because I didn't think that casting directors were able to see what I did. And I really believed in myself as an actor, but like casting directors like to pigeonhole people into boxes. And so I just imagine myself a character. And I also love to research. A lot of my plays are based on history, obviously.
Yeah, I noticed that. And I want to delve into that in a moment, but finish first, continue, and then.
Yeah. So I just, I was like, who of all the people I've ever read about do I think I could portray? And so I just, for a lot of reasons, Keely was very attractive to me. I'm a jazz singer. She's got a very deadpan sense of humor that I feel like I do well. I am from New Orleans. And so, kind of grew up around Louis and Keely, just their music, and their love story was remarkable to me, and so that was my first full length play that, as you mentioned, I wrote with Jake. And it just blew up larger than, I thought it would, both for me as a writer and an actor.
Sure. Now, I obviously I understand why Louis and Keely would be a musical. And then you go into H.H. Holmes, which is interesting because that's Devil in the White City, if I'm not mistaken, is the name of the book that details his what,
His, yes,
whatever you want to call them.
Murdering spree
Yes.
of,
Which is interesting because I think DiCaprio owns the rights to the book to make the movie, which is I don't think it's been portrayed. I don't think it's ever been portrayed in film yet.
Mm-hmm.
But you've tackled it as a musical.
Yes.
So why a musical opposed to just like, I'm going to write the play, but.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So I'm always finding for myself as an artist, I want to do things that scare the hell out of me, right? So obviously Louis and Keely, I didn't write the lyrics. I wanted to do a musical where I started to, take a stab at writing lyrics. Take a stab at writing lyrics. Didn't mean to do that, but here we go. And I was looking for because I love to research. I was looking for a new sort of historically based piece of work, and in an era that I hadn't explored yet. And I did read Devil in White City. And then I read a whole bunch of other things about Holmes. It was also kind of around the same time as I was becoming outraged with a bunch of mass shootings, with the victims' names never being, the victims being forgotten, the perpetrator being, lionized in a way, and so I wanted to give the women a voice. I wanted to make them the heroes. And also my first two successful pieces were largely about men, and I wanted to have a very woman heavy piece this time. And I thought that because largely they would be finding their voice from beyond the grave, I thought it would be interesting to, once a person had died, that they found that voice through song. So we just kind of explored that. It was a really scary idea to me, because the other weird thing about me is I mostly hate musicals.
One person shows, hate musicals.
I know. So
my repertoire.
So I am attracted to things that I hate because I want to go, well, how could I write it in a way that I would like it, right?
Sure.
And Ryan Johnson, who you mentioned, had never written musical, but he writes a lot of rock music and a lot of, rock operas. And that's exactly why I wanted him. I'm like, you don't write musicals, so let's partner up. And he just loved the story of Holmes. So it just felt like a good fit. And we worked well together as collaborators. And so that took about 6 years to get right. I think we finally got it right when we got it to Webster, because we really just had to give dead women, a way to speak from beyond the grave and have their own agency, which was hard.
Sure.
But I think we got there.
So you got Louis and Keely. You've got Stoneface, which is based on Buster Keaton. You've got the H.H. Holmes. Where do you start when you're researching real life historical people? And what do you choose? How do you pick what you showcase or what you highlight?
That's a good question. I think we do, as writers, writing history, we do the best work when we find something that happened in the past that is relevant today, right? And so for me, very much with Deadly, like I was saying, it was about mass shootings, but it was also a lot of the Me Too stuff was coming through, with women finding their voice and speaking as a group, and then they can be heard, right? I'm writing one now. My next one is based on the first woman that ran for president, Victoria Woodhull, in the 1870s. And there are a lot of really interesting things about women's suffrage and women not being heard. And it's also a musical. I'm partnering with Brendan Milburn this time. And he's a really great collaborator too. He wrote Behavior of Brodus, which won Ovation Award for Best Musical. And I'm just having a lot of fun with it, but I think we're learning. We can learn lessons today if we're looking at the past, because if I'm writing about today right now, people will be like, no, we're so polarized right now that people, if I feel like I'm talking exactly about your political party, and I'm commenting on a certain thing, then people will not listen to it. Whereas if I can couch some of the things that are happening now through history, people might be able to hear it better.
So how much research do you do, and how do you sift through what makes it into the piece?
That is a good question. And I've met a lot of writers of history, in particular playwrights and screenwriters, that want to put all of their knowledge on the page. They want to show all their homework.
Sure.
And,
right.
That really, I think, gets into trouble. I think really, and you have to know all of it, obviously, and you can put in little tiny specks of details for instance, the Buster Keaton people. Like we had all these fans come through, and one of the characters that I had was Roscoe Arbuckle, and everybody that knows about the history of what happened to Roscoe Arbuckle, that is a fan of Buster Keaton. But the only reference I had to the Arbuckle scandal in the entire play was, you didn't do anything to that lady. Roscoe says, I know, and that's all we did.
So,
right?
And for those of our listeners that may not know, what is that history? No, not to say that they can't go look it up.
Of course. So Roscoe Fatty Arbuckle, had a whole career, was the biggest silent movie film star in his day. Was completely ruined and scandalized when there was a party where a woman died, and everyone accused him of raping her with, in a very,
they can look that up. They can look that
in a way that killed her. And by all accounts, he was acquitted. Everybody was there, said that it didn't happen. She was a person that just had an unfortunate appendix burst, but he couldn't live down the reputation, and so his career was ruined, and he was never really able to work again.
Okay.
So that is the larger story. He was best friends with Buster Keaton, but we didn't want to get into that. The story wasn't about all of that. So,
sure.
But we do reference it, right?
Okay, fair enough. Yeah.
So, I think you just kind of, when you're telling a story, especially a story of history that's well known, you can wink at certain moments, but you have to figure out, what is the theme? What am I really trying to say here? And everything you put in the play has to build towards that theme. I had a really great play dramaturg that I always have in the back of my mind. And he told me that everything either has to do one of three things. It has to move the plot, reveal character, or tell a joke. If it doesn't do those things, you don't need it, And so I might have done all this research on Victoria Woodhull, but I'm only going to tell the part that moves the story along.
Can we unpack each one of those?
Sure.
And how you approach them?
Yeah.
Okay. So move the story forward. I think that's kind of self-explanatory, but how do you catch yourself while you're writing and say when do you realize that you're straying? Right.
Well, so when you connect the dots and every writer has their way of how they put their piece together. I have a loose outline, and it's like, where am I trying to get, what are the moments I want to hit? And obviously I'm writing screenplays too, and that structure is very different and very more structured. I love that playwriting is very much freer, but everything that I do as a playwright has to relate to the theme and the thing I'm trying to say. And so I guess as I hit each moment, I'm like, is this moment, is this part of the scene, relevant to the greater thing, where the ultimate plot point of where I'm trying to get, the ultimate, overcoming of the person's, greatest fear, or their, or finding their greatest joy, or, there's like the greatest thing, the tent pole that we got to get to. And if it doesn't build up into that for me, like, I'm just not interested in talking about it.
What about, yeah. do you tackle subplots as well?
I do. I'm also, though, I'm a very economic writer. I don't tend to linger. I know a lot of playwrights that really enjoy all the minutia and the details of their character, and I know readers that loved it. But I'm a very get to the point kind of person. My greatest fear is boring an audience.
No, great. It's good. It's good for you to have.
I've watched so many of my plays in the audience. People don't know I'm the playwright, which I'm happy to. And I'm always looking around, and I can tell when people are sort of at the front of their seat, or when they've kind of reclined and they're not engaged, And so I'm just trying to cut to the chase, and I'm also trying to give the actors something fun to do, and I think that's where it helps, having come from it as an actor, because I know when something engages me from that point of view.
What does it mean? What does it mean to be an economic writer, and how do you achieve that?
I think a lot of writers do this. I overwrite first. I just kind of do a vomit draft, Sure. I just get everything out there. And then I go through everything I've written and figure out where I'm being redundant, figure out if I can say something more with an action as opposed to a line, figure out, because then that gives the actors more to do, makes them more engaging. I guess that's what I mean.
How do you express that on the page as far as your action goes?
So I guess it would just be,
especially in like dialogue, if you say, oh, this would be better as an action.
Yeah.
And again, this is one of the things that happens a lot, and I apologize for our listeners who've heard this a zillion times from me. I always put writers on the spot at some point during the interview, because I'm asking something for something specific that may be hard to express when you're not in the act of writing. So yeah. So I apologize if I'm asking for something that you can't express because you're not in the midst of doing it.
Well, it's interesting. What I used to do, I used to trust the actors a whole lot with just knowing, just going, if it's a big monologue about love, and I would just go on and on and on about the minutia of like why this character loves this other character, I would truncate it and be like, she brings her hand to his face or something. But I've seen a lot of newer playwrights actually in the action lines, and I don't know how I feel about this or not, but I'm finding it's going on a lot more with newer playwriting, where the playwright will put in the action line what the actor should be thinking, and
interesting. So they're projecting intent, I guess.
Yeah, right. And I don't know if I agree with that. Because I have seen a lot of actors take my work and elevate it, because I think I'm writing one thing and then the actor takes it in a whole new realm.
Sure. Yeah.
And I kind of love that, because then it's a collaboration, right?
But you said that if correct me if I'm wrong, you said you used to trust actors.
Oh no, I still do trust actors.
Okay. What I'm saying is like, what I meant by that is like, did that change your writing? Did you, not that you don't trust actors, because of what you just said, obviously based on other playwrights' writing intent. So I'm curious if there was a adjustment in your writing because you started to maybe had to put like certain actions in because maybe the intention wasn't there as far as that action goes.
Yeah, or they would be confused. I just thought that something on the page was just inherent, and then I would, I'm lucky enough that for Stoneface and Louis and Keely and Deadly, I got to be there in rehearsals for actors to ask me questions, and then I would realize that there would be something that just wasn't as obvious as I thought it was, and so those would be moments that I would make sure that it was either on the page in the line or, through action item.
How beneficial was that, being there during rehearsals, being present for actors, being a resource in that regard? How did it help your writing?
It was absolutely crucial for me. I think as I was developing as a playwright, for Louis and Keely and Stoneface especially, and Deadly a little bit too, I was writing around specific people
Sure.
through a company of actors who I trusted. And obviously for Stoneface, I was writing that for my husband. So that was, very specifically for a certain person. I think a lot of playwrights, that are writing for an ensemble or an acting company, I think about Tracy Letts and Steppenwolf and, people like that write for an ensemble like the RSC, you hear these voices in your head. And I was at Sacred Fools Theater Company for a long time, like 15 years. And so by the time, so that really helped me kind of develop as a playwright. And now I'm at a point where I'm just writing for just actors in general and not particularly people in mind, but it does help. Like, I don't know, it does help to work with people who who you trust, and you have kind of a shorthand artistic language with.
What's different about writing for somebody? When you're just writing just to write, it's kind of, self-explanatory, I suppose. But when you're writing for somebody specific, how does that come into play?
I think part of the magic of writing any script, playwriting or screenwriting, is just having the dialogue in your head, right? A lot of people ask me, well, how do you, sorry, my notifications are not off. I apologize. I think that
I'll do a like, share, subscribe right at that moment.
Oh, perfect. I think that there's a certain magic to just having dialogue appear in your head. And people often ask me, like, how do I do that? Right. And I'm imagining my friends talking. I'm imagining how I would say something, but obviously each character talks in a different way, different, they use different words, they have a different rhythm. And so to have already people in my head who I know very well, and like, well, this person speaks in kind of a staccato, and this person is just always yelling, and this person's very, quiet spoken. And it helps me differentiate the voices of the characters, which is so important. I think a lot of writers don't do that enough.
Is that a recommendation to channel somebody that when you're writing a character?
Absolutely. I think when I'm coming up with characters, it's, oh, this person's like this friend of mine. I'll even go so far as to that's a Libra and that's an Aquarius, and that's like, oftentimes I find like the zodiac like gives such great character descriptions, and like it kind of go, that's their asset, that's their flaw, which everybody needs.
Give me examples of assets and flaws, and how do you portray that on the page?
Sure. You ask good questions. Okay. So
well, you give me gems. I just have to, I'm like, oh, I like this. I need to know more.
Yeah. And so it's, they say everyone has a tragic flaw, right? Sure. And so I try to go, what's the flaw that my character has to overcome in order to get to the outcome that will be fulfilling for an audience to see, right? So, if I'm going to use myself, and I'm going to use my zodiac, I'm a Libra. My asset is that I see beauty in everything, and I can see both sides of things. My flaw is I can't make a decision, and that might cause me to be on the wrong side of history, right? Okay. Or the wrong side of a bad character, because I'm like, but I can see the good in him. In Stoneface, the tragic flaw of Buster Keaton was his own ego, and which led to him not getting over his career tanking, and that led to alcoholism, which he had to overcome. And become magnanimous by the end and found his redemption. So, it's same with Louis and Keely. For some reason, I write about these men with their egos that they have to get over to find their redemption. So it's always about somebody getting over their flaw, but it takes their asset to help them get over that.
So I think we know what flaw Holmes has. Does he have an asset?
That he's charming. He is able to get these victims because he charms them. He makes these intelligent women who have all these aspirations and goals believe him and entrap them.
We tackled moving the story forward. So you said it has to involve character.
Yep.
It has to reveal something about character. How do you achieve that on the what's that look like on the page?
Sure. And the thing that I think that plays do particularly well as opposed to screenplays is that we can really bathe in character. We can really just go on a journey with somebody in their history and how we got here, because quite often we're just in one room, right? I got to see the humans the other night, and it was just like such a fun journey of exploring all these people and why we're human beings, and how nobody is black or white, how everybody's nuanced, and I think that plays do that particularly well. I think that I'm a playwright. I think that plays are important to see. I think that theater exists because it is the best mirror to humanity that we have right now. And especially right now when we're polarized, to be in a position where we can examine, why does this person who I disagree with think this way? Like, where do they come from? What's their history? And so I think it's really digging into, like, you can start a person and you're like, oh, that guy, I hate that guy. And really dig into, but how did they get here? And a lot of people hate me for it, but even Holmes was like, well, how did this guy get here? And he has this monologue about, how when he was a kid, he used to be bullied, and he had a fascination with, this doctor that was down the street from him. And one day he's walking by and he looked in, the doctor was working on, he had a skeleton, as a lot of doctors did then, so they could, kind of study the human body. And some bullies locked him in there with a skeleton, and he got spooked out and traumatized. And it's that was from his own story, from his own autobiography, how he got into that mental state. And a lot of people were like, you're humanizing a serial killer. And I'm like, I'm just saying, this is how did any of us get to where we're at? That's my curiosity. I think that's should be every writer's curiosity.
I'm fascinated by that comment that you're getting that criticism when I think more often than not, that's what we glorify that right now.
Yeah.
We there's anti-heroes. That's the big thing right now.
Yeah.
And so humanizing somebody, or even glorifying, I was actually kind of surprised. And I was glad that they didn't make Dahmer a sympathetic character.
Yeah.
I was really expecting that, because that's what nowadays, that's what the trend is.
Absolutely. Me too, actually. And that was a hard show to watch.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because you just go this person's a monster, but where do they come from?
And I don't think it's humanizing. I think that you because it's I think you have to have an understanding of how people get there.
Yeah.
Look, here's and again, I want to go off in this tangent in any ways. Look, Harrison Klebold, the kids from the
Oh yeah.
The Colorado.
Yeah.
Look, I don't condone what they did,
Of course.
but after articles that I read, I got it. I understood it.
Yeah.
You know, and you have to. I think you have to. It can't just be this, black and white that they're evil, and they lead something led up to it. I think you have to understand that, especially in terms of preventing it from happening again.
That's exactly right. And that's a little bit my point too, is that if we examine it and just don't go, a lot of people are like, well, that was Satan, that was the devil, that was evil. No, like this is a person that was once a baby. Along the way, like whether it was their brain chemistry or something they were exposed to or trauma, they became this person. And to understand that is to understand how we can stop it from happening again.
Yeah.
And it feels like, along those lines, there are a lot of disgruntled people now just doing mass shootings. Well, how do we stop mass shootings? Well, part of it, besides taking away guns, but part of it is like understanding how we got here, why we are uniquely a culture that has this problem,
Right. So when it comes to revealing character, going back to where we were, what's that?
I went off on a little bit of a tangent.
No, we both did. But again, I think it's still beneficial because I think it still is helpful to understand like what you include in a play and what you don't, and what's revealing about a character. In that regard, do you do that revelation of character through dialogue, or do you do it through action, or both?
It's both.
Okay.
It's both. You can see them through, the decisions that they make, the mistakes that they make, and the occasional right things that they do. I like for things to be muddy. I like for things to be nuanced. I like for bad people to do nice things every now and then, and nice people to do surprising bad things every now and then, because it's like everybody is gray, and I think there's a lot of room for that in plays, so it's the surprising decisions that people make so that nobody is one thing that I think make plays compelling to me.
And the third thing you touched on was telling a joke.
Yeah.
When does a joke land? How do you know? How do you know one you're writing before you put it in front of an audience?
Well, I'm not like
like
a setup punchline kind of joke teller. I think sometimes those are cheap. Sometimes those are good. But I think humor comes from specificity. I think when you just see a person that is so fixated on a thing that you wouldn't, do, like it's just so specific. I find humor in what people are into, or I don't know. I don't know if that makes sense. I'm trying to think of an example right now.
Sure.
There was so much of that, like just the other day when I was seeing The Humans, that I love so much, like that they were like the things that they were eating and the family rituals that they had that were so specific to them, like at one point, like him putting he had a dream about a faceless woman, and the mom put a napkin on her face to reenact it. I don't think it's like set up joke. I think it's specificity that reveals character that is stuff that you can find humor in.
What's an example of specificity?
Specificity. I know it's a hard. I'm always like, whenever I'm giving notes to somebody and it's like just a general joke, I'm like, there's more funny there if you dig deeper into like I'm like,
this is that part. You're not
that part where I'm like, there's a million examples, and I just like get one out of my brain. Yeah, I know. I'm gonna have to start.
I'm gonna put another like, subscribe moment.
I know. Oh yeah, thank you. Like, subscribe. I'm gonna pull out one of my scripts. It's funny. No, like, okay, so the one man show that I wrote was a tragic comedy, I would say, about a guy who was obsessed with somebody who called him up for temp work every morning, and he was really lonely, and his his fish died that day. And so he decided that was going to be the thing that set him off to ask this person that called him every day on a date. He decided he's going to make that person his boyfriend. And so it just devolves over the course of the evening. But,
devolves. Wow. All right.
Yeah. I'm not going to ruin the ending, but, like a lyric that for some reason, the specificity, like I'm feeling so happy, like I want to pour syrup all over my brain. It's like I don't know why that's the thing that popped up to me, but like but he find like his happy place is to watch like talk shows about the dads who like the women that bring the men to the talk shows and are like, you're not the father, and so that validates him, and just the specificity of his world is fascinating and funny to me. I don't know.
How has how do you find the market now? You left LA and headed to Georgia.
Yeah, just a year ago.
How's that market? How do you find that market a little bit more tangible, or was it easier in LA? I'm just curious. I think we all have this idea that in order to be a playwright, you've got to either it's got to be Chicago, New York, or I don't know if you really call LA a theater town. It wasn't for the longest time. I think I don't know.
That's interesting.
I think it keeps trying to be.
There are a lot of plays that came out of LA, but I think that's something the pandemic taught me is that I started doing pitch meetings over Zoom, and my husband, who's an actor, was everything was a self-tape. And we started realizing, because I was also artistic director at a theater company, and a lot of my submissions I was reading were from New Play Exchange and, just from all over. So it wasn't just dedicated to one market. Thumbs up. Sorry. And then I just kind of realized what I do and what my peers do, we're so much more connected now. We really can do anywhere. And the plays I was programming at the time, one playwright was from Alabama, one, playwright was from New York that moved to LA. And, LA, the market there, we have like 200 small theaters, which actually gave new playwrights a chance to have more opportunity because the risk was less, right? Louis and Keely, I think we funded it. The original play was like $7,500, which is crazy. But we could, because the stakes were low. The rent was low for our theater. And so people were willing to take a chance on a known playwright, me at the time. Which gave me an opportunity to grow and then move beyond. But so LA is a good market for that. There are a lot of low risk, low stakes venues to try out your craft, to develop a community of artists, because there's so many storytellers out there, writing, actors, all this stuff. Although people are moving all over the place now. Atlanta is, there's a lot of good writers here. There's, I'm just now getting to know the theater scene, both as an actor and as a writer, and really enjoying it, actually. I worked in the Chicago market. I know a little bit about New York, but to your point, like I think the parameters aren't as strict as they might have been before. I know there are a lot of really good opportunities and a lot of good, places to grow in New York. Of course, it's known as that. But I got to say, like, I know a lot of playwrights, both from Chicago and LA, that found their start there. So, I think the market's widening, happily so.
Yeah, I hope so. As a programmer, what made you what caught your eye? What was the about a piece that said, okay, yes?
Sure. Well, so I had a personal mission because I was that playwright that was unknown, that was sort of given a shot. And so I first of all wanted to find new playwrights and give them a shot in the same way that I was given that opportunity. So I would say that I was and I still am an activist for emerging artists. Everyone's got to have that first person to say yes, right? So I loved finding new plays by new interesting voices that I knew I could work with and help develop. I think largely I was looking for something, somebody that had something to say. Again, with my short attention span, somebody that could do it in an economical way and wasn't too rambly and wasn't too self-indulgent. Just honestly, I go for more funny, more heart, something that makes me go through something, a journey, a full arc, and something that can be done on the stage that you can't do on a screen, right? So it's not something that's imaginative that can only be done in a theater. Because
do you have an example? Again.
Sure. So, for instance, when I was at Sacred Fools, there was a play called that was started as a graphic novel that wound up on our stage based on the Neil Gaiman Neverwhere, right? And so a friend of mine, Scott Leggett, adapted it, turned it into, Rob Koslaric adapted it. My friend Scott Leggett directed it, and it was just like this bananas, like dreamlike kind of adventure, on a stage that you couldn't believe that you were watching, like all of this creativity, all of this art, all of these performances in this collaborative experience that just kind of, blew your mind. And you're like, I am in the theater, right? Mm. I am watching this collaborative group of people in a small theater join together and do something that is blowing my mind. That's the first thing that came to my mind, but there's like a million experiences like that. And musicals do that for me too. I feel like musicals just in general transcend good ones. Let me say, they're also very bad ones. But, there's something about like the rising cacophony of sound mixed with storytelling that can also lift me out of my seat. So.
No, I think you kind of touched on something that's kind of fascinating as well. I'm trying to think if there are musicals that translate well on film. You've got ones that actually started as a film, but
right.
Does that?
I would rather see a West Side Story in a theater and as awesome as the Steven Spielberg one was and the original one was, I would rather see it in a theater just because you're there in the sound, you're there in the act of the thing happening, for instance.
Sure. Going back to programming and giving new playwrights a chance and et cetera, et cetera. How important are accolades to you? If somebody is submitting something and I've won this award, I've won that award. And
I just, art is so subjective that, it's helpful to know that someone else likes it, but that's not like the ultimate decision maker for me, because I think that there are a lot of stories, and this is the problem I think we've fallen into with just American theater in general, is that the people giving the accolades are usually have historically been, white males, right? So they have like a life experience that they like to see stories on the stage that reflect their own life experience. And so I think that as we move towards a better awareness of that, and we shift to find new people to give accolades, I think that will help elevate the underserved voices that probably should have gotten accolades in the past that didn't, because the right people weren't seeing the work.
But do the accolades affect your decision when it comes to programming? Are you going to take something because, this playwright's won these awards, and so,
if I'm being honest, and now I'm also programming a tiny film production company too. And I think the smart thing to do, because you have to, when you're in this position, be a little commercially minded as well.
Sure.
And I think that you do the one thing, you do the one everybody you think loves that, you know, people will come to see and make you the box office, so that you can do the art thing with the voice, elevate the voice that no one's heard yet, you know, so you kind of need one for the other.
So there's a little balance in there.
Talking to you from a pragmatic point of view.
Sure. Well, I think that's as important as well. I think that there is a marketing aspect when it comes to that.
Yeah.
You know, that's why in my point of view, I think that with self-production comes into play a little bit better, because, you know, people don't necessarily want to take a chance. And I think that nowadays it's more accessible. Like you had mentioned earlier that you need permission. I think in the acting front, you definitely need permission in that regard. As far as film and television are concerned, I think.
Yes.
I think in the realm of theater, I don't agree with that necessarily anymore, because I think if there's a role that you want to play, go get the rights and produce it yourself and put yourself in that role. If that's really what it is, stop. Don't let the gatekeepers tell you no.
And I love anybody that has the motor to do that. You know, like you know, as you know, I did it myself. It's I think it's like young actors that are like just starting out. You're like, where's my space? How do I make the rent? How do I get the money? How do I, you know, all the other hoops you have to jump through, you know? So it's, but I do believe in, definitely, yeah, it's way easier to do that than to make your own movie, you know? But, although some of these kids with their YouTubes these days.
Well, that's a good point as well. I mean, at least as far as, the theater aspect, though, the thing that I will say about theater is that if you write a play and you put up your money, at least you have the opportunity to hopefully break even.
Yeah.
You know, if you're going for an actual film, whether it's a short film or not, I don't think that there's a way to make that money back unless that you really blow the roof off of something.
Yeah, I don't know of any short filmmaker friends of mine that make their money back. I think it becomes more a calling card for them. But yeah, I admire, and I know a lot of people that will develop and produce and stage their own play, you know, and a lot of them are really good at it. And I you know, I applaud any artist that does their own work in whatever genre. I think that a lot of it is, it's the catch-22, this business, because it's just like, well, nobody wants to do your work if they haven't seen you, but how do you get seen if nobody will do your work? You know, so it's once you get past that catch-22 and then you break in somehow, you're lucky enough to, then it theoretically becomes easier. It's a slog, you know. But I think that what I would say to playwrights and actors that want to be playwrights and vice versa is that it's a lot of the same storytelling muscle. I feel like a good actor can be a good playwright. A good playwright can be a good actor, because it's kind of the same thing. You're a little bit figuring out the history of a person and developing a life, and just, you know, getting in there. I don't know. A lot of my actor friends are like, well, how do you do that? I'm like, but you do it every day. Like the minute you step onto a set and you envision the history of this person and you take over this person's life, I don't think of it as any different. It's a little bit like playing God.
What makes a good story?
I like to use, I think of the Pixar model a lot. I think they're my favorite storytellers. You know, it's the once upon a time there was this person, and you get into what's their flaw, what's their asset, and then this happened, but because of this, that happened. You know, like there's like this direct, but then they overcame this and they were made better because of it. You know, and somewhere in there, including a relevant theme or something that means something. You know, Louis and Keely was also largely about my divorce. You know, the heartbreak of a marriage that you think should have worked, and you know, the regret of everything that didn't. And so I think finding the piece of you, no matter what story you're telling, that shines through, and that I really know, like, when Vanessa is in my story, because I'm usually quite taken by what I'm writing, and I can't stop, and I sometimes get emotional, and that's when I know it's working.
How did you take an actual incident / couple and project your story into that, opposed to just writing your story? Like why not just write your story? How did you?
Because I thought that if it was just me writing about my divorce, it would, again, people wouldn't go to a magical place. It was, Louis and Keely's story was, to me, much more dynamic. But, the North Star, the place that I got to, the very last line that Keely says in the show is something that I wanted to say to my ex-husband that I never could say. Like, as she leaves the stage, she says this last thing to him that rang true, and it rang true for so many women in the audience. And it was like, because they're getting divorced, and she's like, like, someday, like, you're going to be lying in your bed and you're going to be thinking of me. You're going to finally realize exactly how much I loved you.
Mm.
And he does, but that's his redemption at the very, very end. But I don't know if my ex-husband ever gets that, but I gave it to Louis. So, and that made me feel better. So I got to go through something.
Yeah. And does he need to know that?
Yeah, he doesn't.
Yeah. It's a little more cathartic for you, I'd hope.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
I mean, did you know that going in, or did you just start, I like this story, I want to write it. And then I was like, oh, wow. Hey, wait, now I didn't realize which came first. Were you like, I need to write something cathartic about my past that's going to help me heal? Mm-hmm. Or was it, oh, wow, I know the story. This so applies to me. I need to translate it.
Yeah. I mean, it was a little bit of both. It was all sort of festering in me at the same time. It was me wondering whether or not I needed to leave Los Angeles because I was like not working as an actor, and me loving their music and going, I can sing like Keely Smith. I feel like I can sing nobody can sing like Keely Smith, but I felt like, she kind of lived in my vocal range, and like, oh, I want to be her. And their story just kind of broke my heart. And I think I was projecting what I was going through onto that. And then ultimately that became, I was going through such a heartbreak at the time. And that was really the thing I most wanted to say to my ex-husband. And so ultimately it ended in that. There have been a lot of rewrites on the show, but that line has never changed.
Why the rewrites? How does that work? And when do you know? How does that transpire? Like you go through, if you've saying there's been a lot of rewrites, and I'm assuming that the productions have already happened.
Yep, they have.
What triggers that? Like, that needs to change. Is it done yet?
It's never done. It's never done. Writing is rewriting.
And so I'm like, but
until it's published.
When are you gonna leave it alone?
Well, that's interesting. So it was Jake and I in the play version, the first two iterations of it. We went through Sacred Fools, which is a very successful production, but we learned a lot from it, just from audience reactions when we had them, when we didn't. And we're like, oh, we got to move these songs around. We got to, this part could be funnier, whatever. So we did a tweak, went to the Matrix. And then Taylor Hackford came on board. He comes in. He's the Oscar-winning director of Ray and La Bamba, and does all these musical biopics. And he said, I want to direct it. I want to take it to the Geffen. And he knows Keely. He has a relationship. He brings Keely to the Matrix. I watch Keely watch me be her, which was surreal and very meta. Craziest experience. But she, of course, had her own personal stories that she was like, you got this right. This you didn't get right. by the way, did you know I had a love affair with Frank Sinatra? We didn't know that. Taylor was like, maybe we should include that. So the cast expanded.
Okay, so on that note,
Yeah.
to juxtapose those two things, with Stoneface, you just kind of have that one little bit about the Fatty Arbuckle.
Yes.
How much of the affair with Frank Sinatra made it in?
We went into it, you know, but because it became a point of motivation for Louis. Actually, it made the Louis character stronger because then he had a rival, right? And so and it also gave her kind of a confidant, which was helpful. Before, we just kind of had, it was just me and Jake, and we were relating to the band. We, you know, but the band was the band. They were like actual musicians, and so I throw them a line or two here or there just to, you know, but being able to expand the cast to two more people really helped color in, define the stories, make them even more specific, more truthful, you know. So it became less of it became, with Taylor coming in, and he was credited as writer when we went to the Geffen, because he, you know, it became more of a, less of a play, more of a screenplay kind of, because that was what he did, more of a, they were calling us a bio-tuner by the end of it, you know, not a jukebox musical, a bio-tuner. But it was interesting because we got more specificity. I think our audience for this particular play were huge Louis and Keely fans. They, you know, they wanted to hear that music. They wanted to see it. But the bones were largely the same. We just kind of made the sinew more realistic and more detailed. If that makes sense.
But was there anything that was suggested that you guys were opposed to when it came to that?
From Taylor or from Keely herself?
For both.
Yeah. There were some butting of heads, not from Keely. Anything that Keely ever wanted, we're like, it's your life. I'm not gonna, like,
Fair enough. Sure.
But you know, there were some ideas, because Taylor, you know, comes from a film world, and some things just weren't theatrical or needed. So,
did you stand your ground on those, or did you give in?
I tried to, you know, and so did Jake. I think that a lot of it was me finding my voice, though, as a woman, like, you know, in my early 30s, standing up to like this Hollywood legend, you know, and so it was a little bit hard for me at first. But I do feel there was one time right before we opened that, like, the entire last scene was just, it wasn't hitting my heart part anymore. And I was like, you guys, this isn't working. Like, we got to go back. Like, this isn't the show anymore. This is not what it was. And to their credit, we did. So,
what was it? Do you know?
It was, I think sometimes when too many people, and this is what I'll say too, about when the money gets, when we were a little $7,500 show, like, we got to do whatever we wanted. But when the money got bigger and bigger, and the show got bigger, and we went to the Geffen, and more people's investments were at stake, more people wanted their finger into the art of it, right? And then it really just kind of, the original magic of it got diluted. And I didn't know how to stop that from happening at first, because I just was happy to be at the Geffen. But that was my first show. I think, though, as we got closer to opening and it just wasn't working, you know, I was able to find my voice more, and Jake pushed back too. And got there.
You recognize it. Why don't, why do the powers that be not recognize that?
It's a good question. I think when people's own money gets involved, they want to have their stamp on it. They want to have their piece of it. I see that a lot in television. You know, my husband's worked in TV a lot, and he's told me about the writers' rooms and how intense they can be, and how everybody's really just trying to get their stamp on it. And sometimes it harms the art, you know, the original intent of the story. And so I think it's just, I've noticed that I'm able to be more of an artist when the stakes are lower and the money is not huge. You know, when suddenly have a giant $500,000 budget, then everyone has a lot to say.
I guess the only thing that comes to my mind right now in that regard is like, if that's what you want, then go write your own. Go write yours. You go write your piece, because this isn't what this is my story. If that's what you want, go write yours. Especially if you've got the money to do it.
Oh my gosh, right? It was frustrating, but it was kind of an important time in my young artist career, in that I got to figure out what I believed in, how to stand up for myself, how to find my voice. And so I really
great. Again, congrats. But what advice do you have for people that find themselves in that position? And I feel bad. There's certain times that I like in the festivals that I've done, and some of it's been justified, where it's like, this is great, but it still needs work, or it needs to be adjusted. And, or like, hey, this line, you need to, and going back, and once we started publishing these pieces, I'm like, wow, I really should have left that alone. It really wasn't my place to kind of tweak that particular thing. But you want, as a playwright, you want your work out there. And so at what point do you draw the line? How do you stand up for yourself in that regard?
I mean, like, isn't that like the question for like all artists? Because it's like that line of, yes, of course, we want our work out there. We want a job. We want to sell our stuff, but at what cost, right? It felt to me at the time, I made some sacrifices, because if I just make this sacrifice this one time, then I will have a name, and then everything else, I will have that reputation. Everything else will be, I can do it on my own. It's up to me, and people will trust me, right? But it's, you like, there were times that, and I'm not a person that seeks confrontation at all. Sure. But you just know, I just feel like, as an artist, on not talking about the producer side, but from an artistic side, if like that line means something to you, that is there for this thing that happens over here. This moment is like shines a light on the interior of this character in a way that no other moment does. Those are like, there are certain things. So some lines I can lose, like an actor's like, oh, that feels weird in my mouth. All right, lose it. But some moments are there, and you have to fight for those moments. I think every writer knows what those moments are. Some are superfluous, and some are just like this. You have to have this moment. You have to say this line because of this. And if the producer doesn't understand it, the actor doesn't understand it, that's on them. They need to go sit in a corner. Like,
sure. Yeah. But I mean, at the same time, it's like in going through and working with beginning playwrights and stuff like that. I mean, it's hard. I don't know. It's when do you recognize it? When do you recognize when it needs to stay? And when do you recognize when the other person's actually right? And it seems like it's such a sticky and tricky situation to be in, because sometimes it is for your own good. And sometimes it, like you said, it's about control, and because it's the money. I don't know. I'm really trying to.
Yeah. Something I always like to think about is, the times my plays have really worked, is when it's been an egoless collaboration with everybody there. The director, the actors, the writer, the producer, we're all on the same page. We're all facing the same way with the same goal in mind. And we talk about it before we get there. That's when and that way, if you can trust everyone in the room, and my actor or my director says to me, this doesn't work, but this might work better. Your ego has to be away enough to go, oh, that is a better idea. Everybody benefits if you take the best idea in the room, but you have to know if it's your ego going, no, you can't have the good idea, or like, you just have to put your ego away. Like, I think because theater is a collaborative art, and if this person has a better idea, great. If it's not a better idea, And in my opinion, the playwright is the driver, of the thing in theater. Then you're the boss. I feel like theater is a playwright's medium. They say film is a director's medium. TV is largely an actor's medium. But I think, every playwright should read the Dramatists Guild Bill of Rights. I think that's very important for playwrights to know about. I don't know if you've recommended it on your show before, but it was helpful to me.
A little bit. No, 100%. It was actually, I had never heard of it. I had actually, when our first year of, we did a festival called Play Noir. It was all film noir style 1-act plays.
Cool.
And when we were looking for submissions, I reached out to, and my former playwriting instructor, and he's like, well, I'll let my students know about it, but I'm not going to recommend you do it. He's like, that they do it. And he linked to the Playwrights Bill of Rights. And I'm like, reading, I'm like, yeah. There's nothing there I disagree with.
Right.
So I don't, I think it.
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I think it's very beneficial. I think it's something to definitely keep in mind. I think that there are a few things here and there that are worth being lenient on when you're first starting out. I think that they're great. Awesome. You wrote something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're ready. You still have to get your name out there.
Sure.
And I go, and this is coming from a place of producing standpoint, sure, and a playwriting standpoint, because look, it's like, I'm taking a chance. I would love, we didn't pay our playwrights. I'll be the first one to say it, but at the same time, it's like, we're in this boat together. Like, I'm fronting the money. I'm not expecting, if I make money, awesome. Most likely I'm not, but I maybe break even, and I don't need to add $2,000 more to my budget to give somebody that is probably not going to bring anybody in, but you got a good work, and I'm willing to put my money up for it in order to give me the experience as a director and an actor, and, give you the opportunity to have your work out there. I don't know. It's tricky.
Well, first of all, I think it's, by the way, great that you're giving new playwrights a chance, an opportunity. Everybody needs that. It's like, you have to see your work out there. You have to see an audience receive it. That is so part of the process. So Thank you for doing that. I think it's helpful for people to know, and a lot of playwrights don't know until it's too late. I came to the Bill of Rights a little bit too late. Mm-hmm. And once I had it, I was like, see, you can't do this, right. Listen. So that's, you're right. It's not something, I don't think a brand new playwright that just, was like, here you do my 1-act, necessarily needs to wield that just yet. I think it's important for a person to just get their stuff on the boards. But I think it's helpful to know that it's there, to know what your North Star is, what you're aspiring to, if that's the road you want to go down.
Well, and again, to clarify, I don't disagree with anything on there. And I don't think that, compensation comes in different forms. Yeah. And sometimes it's not necessarily a monetary compensation.
Oh, listen, I have a career because Louis and Keely, I was not paid as a playwright. I was obviously compensated with a career, so it's like, it's about getting your stuff out there. And then, every artist, you have to get your stuff out there. And then you get to that point where people are like, I'm investing in you and I'm paying for what you do, but you have to get it out there. And part of what we do as actors and playwrights is it has to be seen. I can't just paint something and put it in a gallery. What we do, our art form has to be on a stage. In order to get better at it. And so it's kind of a tricky, it's kind of a tricky thing, isn't it?
It is, and again, it's like, oh, well, I should get paid for my work. I should get paid as an artist. And I'm like, I get that it takes some time. I get that if it's Yeah, it is. This is a very controversial subject right now, and I know
I know.
we're going to get a little flack for it. But
history.
yeah, I get it. You put 5 hours work into something, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's appealing or good.
You can say a similar thing about athletes, right? There are amateur athletes that don't get paid to get good at what they do, to be discovered by the pros, and off they go, right? Sure. So it's just everybody needs a launching pad, for what they do, and oftentimes you take the hits to get that launching pad so that you can get the experience and the expertise to be paid. It's internship when you're a doctor. It's an internship when you're every career has this entry space. So I think of it as that.
And most of those entry spaces cost money.
True.
You're not going in to learn, when you go to med school, you're not going in to do it for free. You're actually having to pay it.
Yeah.
And then you get paid to pay it off. I think that so in this regard, I mean, I suppose with acting, it's a little bit different because you're taking acting classes and you're putting the investment in there. And maybe you're doing the same thing with playwriting. But I think things are accessible. I think there's a lot of things out there that you can kind of get for free or lower investment.
Well, especially now, because I know a lot of people that call themselves writers because they saw something on Google, or they read an article, or they bought a book and learned how to write. And it's a little bit of it's interesting.
Yeah, but with this, in this regard, this comes up sometimes as well. It's because but you didn't take the academic route as far as playwriting goes, did you?
No, I was a minor in it. I did take playwriting classes, but
okay.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I did not major in it. I did not graduate with playwriting.
Right.
But I understand plays, having
sure
an actor.
Is there anything that you learned in class that just that's stuck with you?
In my playwriting class?
Yeah. That you really can tap into and say that this was a nugget. I would not have gotten this if I wasn't in this class.
You know what? No, I got more of my knowledge in the field, I would say, from that dramaturg who, had the 3 rules, which I, adhere to, but also by watching almost every play I've ever done. I've gone to every performance of it just to learn. And that has taught me so much. And just by reading and by being around other playwrights and talking about plays, and by, experiencing plays as an actor. That's largely how I learned.
What's the biggest obstacle that you had to overcome?
I think my own, it took me a long time to call myself a writer. I was probably about 4 or 5 scripts in before I called myself a writer, so it was my own, I don't know, self-esteem, or I'm like, no, I'm an actor, but I write. And then finally I was like, no, I can say that I'm a writer, it's okay, which is interesting.
Well, I think it's an interesting thing in that regard as well. Like there's this label, there's a societal label that is like, if you haven't been published, if you haven't been, right. Your work hasn't been performed, and that therefore you're not. If you're not successful,
right? You can't say
that. Therefore, you're not.
Yeah.
Which I think is a sad thing.
Well, art, it's like, how many artists became successful after they died, right? Like sometimes people are writing ahead of their time, or they're writing something that people aren't ready to receive yet. That doesn't mean they're not good at what they do. It just means that there's not an audience yet, or they don't know how to get it to that audience. It's interesting.
You mentioned it. I'm going to ask you again, so forgive me, because you said it, but I'm still interested. What are you working on right now?
Oh, sure. So it's a musical about Victoria Woodhull, and it's a really fun journey. But this one is a lot of work research-wise. But I'm excited about it.
How do you do your research when with these historical figures?
Well, I'll show you. I've got this book I'm looking at, I've got this book written by one of my major characters. I'm reading a lot of books. There's a lot of stuff in the public domain about these awesome characters. Actually, you can look up their letters that they wrote to each other on government websites, because a lot of them were involved in government at the time, and a lot of them were suffragettes, and a lot of them like have these amazing stories. The fun thing for me about these historical figures is finding the way in. Like, they led such vast lives, and nobody ever knows how to tell them. And so my puzzle piece is always figuring out, all right, where do we get in with this story? What's the actual fun bit that we want to hear? There was a Victoria Woodhull musical that like flopped in early 90s. And I was like, why? Why did it flop? It's such a fascinating story. And I was like, they didn't get in right. It's how I feel about like the Chaplin movie. I was like, I want to make sure that we do the Buster Keaton movie. We get in the right way. You don't tell the whole thing. You can't possibly. You tell the interesting part of the life. Same with Louis and Keely. Same with this one. You would think that Victoria Woodhull's the interesting character, but actually it's the friend that wanted to be her. And that's the story that we're telling, So it's, you find the interesting way into this fascinating history, but you do it in a way that's relatable.
How much do you use from their own words and other people and their peers, opposed to somebody who wrote a biography about them? Because it feels like there's a little bit more of a insertion from the people who are writing about these people, opposed to, it seems like you can get so much more in depth about a person from reading their own words.
I totally agree. I found that when working on Deadly, there were a lot of assertions with Devil in White City about characters that he made up, like a whole character, like that didn't even you're like, and this was the first victim. She never died, And so a lot of the people that take historical works and put them into, novels, and they do put their own narrative on it. And you're absolutely right. I sort of get like the original narrative from the book, but then I go, okay, then I go to the back and they have all of the index of like where they got this information from. And then I go to the original letters, original words, and I try to write more from there. It's what I learned writing a different show. It's firsthand research as opposed to secondhand research, as opposed to thirdhand research, right? So I don't want to write a show about a book that somebody wrote. I want to write a show about the original letters, but the original, the book will kind of point me in the right direction, I guess.
How much creative license do you take when you write these?
On one hand, I say, don't let the truth get in the way of a good story, right? But I do try to honor the intent of the characters. I'm not going to make something up, I try to thread the needle. So what I might do is take, because we can't have like a 30-person show. So what I might do is take like 3 people that kind of did the same thing in the world of Victoria Woodhull and make them one character. I might have to change a location. Like, she did this speech, but we're going to put it in this place, which doesn't largely hurt the intent of what Victoria Woodhull was doing, or her friend Isabella Beecher. I'm getting at what they were trying to do, and largely what the thrust of the larger picture is. Any
advice for beginning playwrights, or even established playwrights? Anything that you find that really helps you?
Beginning playwrights, I would just say finish it. A lot of people start a story and just never finish it. Just get it out, vomit out that draft. Just finish it. A lot of people can't just finish it. And established playwrights, I think there's a lot of frustration right now because of the state of theater, because people are going, what's going on? COVID really messed us up. Like, people don't know who they can write about anymore. And I would just say, stop apologizing and just write your heart, and I've definitely felt that too. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Where can people find your work?
You can follow me on Twitter, VC Stewart. That's my handle. I don't have a website. This production company that I'm part of is launching on Monday, and I'm sure by the time you air this, you'll be able to find it at www.storymillentertainment.com.
Wonderful. Any other socials that you're on that people can find you, or that how they can reach out to you?
I'm also Instagram, VC Stewart.
Wonderful. So. Vanessa Stewart, thank you for coming on to the Playwright Spotlight.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Playwright Spotlight. Again, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment down below, and share this channel with a friend. If you're listening to us on your favorite podcast platform, be sure to leave a 5-star review and subscribe to the channel. In the meantime, until we see each other again, keep writing.